Hey friends out there in YouTube land, Robert Hamm here with Robert Hamm Photography. Today we've got another Check Out My Camera coming straight for you. Today we're talking about the AGFA Cadet. This is the B2 model. What a cool camera. Check this thing out right here. Really nice. Before we get started, you guys know how it goes. If you like this type of content, if you want to see more things like this, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Also, another announcement, those of you that are faithful followers will know I've got a camera under prototype right now that I plan on bringing to production through a Kickstarter campaign. It's kind of taken some inspiration from cameras like these, and I'm excited about that. So stick around. Let's keep watching, but we'll know more. I've got a media kit coming out for you guys in the next week or so. Got a big reveal coming up as well, so lots of fun stuff happening. But before we go any further, help me out. If you're watching this and you have not yet answered, chime in. I want your information. I can produce this camera, or a camera similar to this. My own production is going to be either one of two ways, either 120 film or Instax film. Let me know what you think would be more viable, what you would prefer to have today. I can only do one, so get your comments in now. Get your opinions out there. Today we're talking about the AGFA B-2 Cadet. How cool of a box camera is this? Really neat. 1930s, 1940s time frame. I think this one's like 38, something like that, to 42. Really neat camera. It takes 120 film. It's cartridge driven. You know, we got a cartridge in the back that we can pull out. But let's actually just kind of go around and look at the outside of the camera before we take it apart and look on the inside of the camera. First thing you're going to notice is I've got the ground glass cleaned up real nice, and you can actually see that image projecting from my wall over there. And when we look, you'll see there's two ground glass in there because the camera can be used in a horizontal or vertical or portrait or landscape, right? So why not give it two ground glass for that? The shutter mechanism on this is actually a rotary shutter. We'll get into that with a speed of around 1/60th of a second. The aperture on this is something like f11, maybe f16. I don't really know. I've heard reports both ways. But anyways, this is a medium format film, and so it's kind of more like maybe f8 to f5.5, f5.5, 5.6, f8, something like that. If you were to talk about it in 35 millimeter equivalent. Remember, 120 film is 1/2 0.5 crop factor if you're comparing it to 35 millimeter film, which is pretty cool. Let's talk about this too. They've added some interesting things on the side here. We've got a diaphragm, so there are some ability to have some control over like an f16 or an f11 aperture, and you also have a small filter. We'll look at that later. And then you've got your shutter, which is just a single shutter push and then it resets. You might even be able to see that little spring moving. We'll look at that stuff a little bit closer. If you look, first of all, we'll notice traditional case-making designs with the rewind knob right there, which is really nice. An Art Deco pattern on the front. It looks really cool. Feels good. And a leatherette or a bonded leather kind of feel to it. In the back, we'll see two different viewing for your film, for that roll film. And we'll get into why they have two holes in just a moment. You'll also notice that it's all coupled very easily with just these little buttons, these little clasps. If you see that little clasp right there, how cool is that? Just very simple design. Simple. And works. So opening it up, you'll notice there's two little viewing lines that we talked about a second ago, viewing holes, and you'll see the inside. This is a cassette, so the minute that we pull the spool line, the rewind spool out, we'll notice that the cassette can come out. So there you have the inside. This is the inside of the box. I'm trying to get you some light in there. And you can see the back of that shutter. But looking at it a little bit more closely, we actually see the cartridge, which is where you would load your film. How cool is that? We also notice that the actual lens is built into the cartridge. Makes a lot of sense, really, when you think about it, because you can control much more precisely how far the actual front element is from the actual film itself, and that's how you're going to determine focus. Speaking of focus on this camera, everything after about 6 to 8 feet out is in focus. Nothing ahead of 6 feet or in front of 6 feet, 6 feet or closer will be in focus with a camera like this, which makes it a perfect, street photography or documentary every day. You don't really need to worry about focus. You don't really need to worry about shutter speed. You just have to have a type of film in there that's going to work with your settings. Shooting the Sunny 16 rule with this is real simple because on a bright day, which is when you'd use something like this, ISO 100 speed film or 50 speed film will get you exactly what you need. Also, this kind of design makes it easy to clean the lens, and it also protects the front lens element with the other front lens right here, which is really just a glass screen protector at that point. Looking right here, you'll notice that the cartridge loads so that new film goes up top where the spool is, where the take-up spool is. It's got a little hole right there where that take-up spool would actually clip into. That's going to allow you to wind. Looking on the back, you'll notice that the actual camera obscura area right there is conical in shape. It's like cone shaped. It goes outwards. That helps get rid of any extemporaneous light that's coming through. Make sure that you don't have any cross collimation of light right there, which is pretty cool. And also, check this out. With this, I think this is 6 centimeters by 10 centimeters right there. And then you can actually gate it with these little masks between 6 centimeters and 4 centimeters. How cool is that? That's neat, because that means that you've got additional options when using this film. And now we know why you have the 2 holes, because depending on which masking procedure you're using will help you determine which hole to look through for your film count. Obviously, the film is a set number of feet for a set number of exposures, and if you mask it like this, you would not get as many exposures, which is why you would mask it smaller, because you want a larger amount of images per film. So you would want to have this additional hole so that you wouldn't waste film having complete winds that we're expecting you to use a 6x10. The additional hole to let you see through there will help you be able to mask this so that you can use fewer winds in order to get what you want. Now, the biggest way that this works is by loading the film into the first hole, then winding so that it's at the second hole, then the other numbers popped up there. And that will allow you to maneuver through and be able to use standard 120 film at the time, just like today, without having to have any special markings. Otherwise, you wouldn't know. So you load it to the first hole, you move it to the second hole, then the other number pops up and you do that, and that's how you use this little mask. So how cool is that? All right, we've looked at those things. Let's actually talk about the camera a little bit more. I'm going to take it apart for you because that's where things get interesting. Now, these cameras were made to be taken apart. They were made to be serviced as necessary. But you'll notice after years, the shutter on this camera is still working just fine. And let's get a look at that to see if we can figure out why. Just by popping off that little pin, we can now remove the other one and the front comes off. Looking through here, you'll see the ground glass viewers. These are both concave lenses right here that allow it to focus and be refracted off of the actual stainless steel in there. And this is your front element that protects the lens. Nice close-up right there. Looking in a little bit, this is where it gets really cool. Check that out. So you can see the stainless steel, which gives you that 45-degree angle in order to pop that light up so that you can be focused through the ground glass. Notice now without that lens, you're not getting any kind of focus right there. But looking in front, you'll notice it's very easy to clean. So if your ground glass is all grimy, you can clean it pretty easily. Also, if the steel needs to be cleaned, you can polish that up pretty easily. Very simple operation right here. Notice, look at the shutter. The shutter, this is a rotary shutter. Notice how the spring actuates by pulling the lever. And once it gets to the point of tension where it releases, it switches around. So if we are to close that down, once we get to the point where it releases, that's when the spring is actually moving. So the nice part is the spring is never under tension in this camera, which is why if you find them and the shutter is working at all, it will most likely be working within a very tight tolerance of the original 1/60th or 1/30th, just depending on the camera. That is pretty cool, and that's because of that 90-degree torsion spring that they used right there. This is actually the rotary shutter that you'll notice right here, and if we pull this little lever out, we'll find our bulb mode. Now you can see the shutter staying open, which is pretty cool. You'll also notice, maybe you can see through there, that there are some additional diaphragms. We've got the full, this is probably f11. Then you've got a filter right here, which is a yellow filter, great for bright daylights and adding contrast to your black and white images. And there, it's probably an f16. Of course, I don't have that information correct, but from what I've seen, that's what I believe it to be for this style of camera. So looking at this, we also notice something else. With the lens being behind the shutter mechanism and the shutter mechanism having the ability to gate different lights with that little lever for your different apertures, that means that you have a less chance of vignetting taking place because the lens is performing the final mask for any extemporaneous light that would come in. And how cool is that? What a great little design. That is one of the reasons that this was a very popular model of camera. One of the things that is difficult when you get into cameras like this is the vignetting issue. You can have some exterior vignetting taking place, and that usually happens when the shutter is in front of the, or when the shutter is behind the lens, because the lens is gathering the widest amount of light. Notice that it's a very wide lens compared to those apertures. So by putting this lens behind the shutter and the aperture, you're now able to do two things. Number one, control the tolerances from how the film is sitting in comparison to here. And number two, you're also able to maintain more control of that actual light that's hitting it, because the gating is taking place in front of the lens at least twice. Once by the rotor, once by the shutter, and then again by the lens. So that really helps cut off any of that exterior light that could become non-collimated, so that it would cause vignetting, which is an issue with these kind of cameras. Guys, this has been my first look. I'm going to give you a look at that again. This is kind of like a review, a first look. I really had a lot of inspiration drawn from this camera. Of course, my box style camera that I'm producing right here has quite a few upgrades, so the internals are not exactly similar. Lots of fun stuff when you start using modern techniques to make these cool cameras. They're going to be made with the same case-making handmade technology that goes into this, which is still around today, which is why this is nothing but press board, a very strong kind of cardboard, but this camera is still sturdy and standing around today because of very good, high-quality craftsmanship. And luckily, those types of tools and that type of trade is still around today. So guys, I'm excited to be able to share with you this new old review of this AGFA B-2 Cadet. Lots of fun right here. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm Robert Hamm with Robert Hamm Photography. Catch me over on Instagram and Twitter, where I talk a lot about Instax. You guys know me for that. I want to encourage you to continue watching. I want to thank you for watching, and I want to share with you, as always, we'll catch you on the flip side.